four streamers are heading to an abandoned house, hoping for cheap scares and viral content. But when a murderous cult crashes their live stream, it turns into the kind of horror show that no one's logging out of alive. With the viewers watching every bloody moment in real time, Chad and his crew are about to face more than they ever bargained for. This streamer is about to have the worst night of his life. Spicy Steve, a wannabe streamer, has built his reputation by going live while exploring haunted places. Tonight, he's at an abandoned factory, hoping to encounter the ghost of a demonic janitor, but it turns out to be his biggest mistake. Initially, the place seems deserted, but when Steve enters the bathroom, he notices a pair of boots under one of the stalls. Suddenly, a man in a hockey mask bursts through the door, terrifying Steve so much that he breaks down crying like a baby. However, it turns out to be nothing more than a prank orchestrated by his biggest rival, Chad. A month later, Steve is still being relentlessly mocked for what happened at the factory, but he's determined to redeem himself. He plans on teaming up with Chad for an epic live stream at Devil's Manor, one of the most notoriously haunted locations in the world. Upon arriving at the airport, they meet up with fellow streamers, Jennifer and Spencer, who have a more family-friendly vibe, and head to the mansion just after nightfall. Before the stream even begins, Steve already has more than 10,000 viewers eagerly waiting. But once they go live, Chad immediately starts hogging the spotlight. Steve is getting irritated, but he can't deny it's effective. Their viewership shoots past 50,000 in no time. As they approach the mansion, Steve gives some background on the place. It once belonged to a cult leader named Wilson Burroughs, who abducted 5 townspeople for his dark rituals, but was never caught. Chad cracks a joke about possibly running into Burroughs tonight, unaware of just how right he is. Before they head in, Steve tries to warn everyone to be cautious, as the house could be dangerous. But before he can even finish his sentence, Chad sprints inside without a second thought. The others chase after him, and soon they're all exploring the eerie house. While the atmosphere is undeniably creepy, it's mostly filled with the usual abandoned junk you'd expect. Then they hear a strange sound coming from the kitchen, something knocking from inside the closet. Suddenly the door flies open, but it's just Chad, wearing a light-up mask, pulling one of his typical pranks. Already bored, they decide to head upstairs to check out the bedrooms, where some of the infamous sacrifices supposedly took place. As Jennifer and Spencer continue exploring elsewhere, Chad and Steve arrive at a room with a destroyed bed and windows boarded up from the outside. According to crime scene photos, there should be a pentagram somewhere on the floor. Sure enough, Chad finds it hidden under a rug, and to make things worse, the floor is still stained with blood. That's when Chad gets a wild idea. He announces that if they hit 150,000 viewers, he'll pee on the pentagram live for everyone to see. The viewers pile in, and true to his word, Chad follows through with the challenge, treating it like a joke. Their stream skyrockets past 160,000 viewers, with the chat going wild. They decide to check on Jennifer and Spencer's stream, finding them in a bathroom, showing off Spencer's abs. But their viewership is a fraction of what Chad and Steve are pulling in. Continuing their exploration upstairs, Chad and Steve stumble upon a room with an old TV in the corner. On their way out, Chad notices a lock on the outside of the door and pretends he's going to lock Steve inside as a prank. Farther down the hall, they find a staircase leading up to the attic. Knowing attics are where the creepiest stuff usually hides, they climb up to take a look. And this time it doesn't disappoint. As their flashlights scan the room, they're shocked to discover a real dead body, suspended by chains on the far side of the attic. Steve quickly realizes they're in way over their heads, saying they never intended to find anything genuinely dangerous. But Chad, ever the showman, sees it as an opportunity for even more content. He announces to the camera that he's going to poke the body with a stick. The viewers, hungry for more, push them to go further. Chad eggs Steve on, and when the chat starts daring them to put some of Steve's merch on the corpse, Steve hesitates at first. But with the viewer count surging past 400,000, he caves. Handing the camera to Chad, Steve walks over and places his hat on the body's head. Laughing nervously, they rush downstairs to find the others. But little do they know, their fans are about to witness something far worse than a prank. They're about to watch them die. Downstairs, Steve and Chad bump into Jen and Spencer, asking them if the body they saw was real or just another prank. Jen and Spencer are clearly taking the situation seriously, insisting they need to call the cops immediately. But Steve and Chad, determined to keep the stream alive all night, dismiss their concerns. After some back and forth, they decide to split up. Jen gets the car keys and heads outside while Steve and Chad stay behind, still riding the high of their skyrocketing view count. Steve, however, starts to notice the tone of the chat has shifted. Instead of praise, it's flooded with hate comments from viewers who think they crossed a line. Chad, unfazed, brushes it off, but Steve begins to regret using the body for views. Wanting to make things right, Steve tells Chad he's going to retrieve his hat and then call for help. Chad, annoyed by Steve's change of heart, announces he's going solo and will stream on his own account. As Steve apologizes to the viewers, he begins to realize his friend might actually be a jerk. Meanwhile, their viewer count starts dropping by the thousands. Steve heads back up to the attic, where he's surprised to find the body has completely vanished. The only thing left is the chains that had been holding it up. He spots his hat in the rafters and begins to relax, figuring this must all be another one of Chad's elaborate pranks. Feeling better, he sets up his camera and starts to retrieve the hat, unaware that something is lurking in the shadows. As Steve struggles to reach his hat, the chat lights up with warnings, urging him to look behind him. Laughing it off as just another joke, Steve scrolls through his filters, using a ghost effect to mock the comments. But as soon as the filter activates, it locks onto something behind him. Now genuinely spooked, Steve decides it's time to bail. Before he leaves, though, he flips the camera around and gives the house a final middle finger. But just as he turns, a masked figure with an axe emerges from the darkness and swings, striking Steve in the back. He collapses, killed live in front of 825,000 viewers. That makes one victim down with 5 more to go. Out in the car, Jen's been watching Steve stream and is starting to feel uneasy. She tries texting him, but he doesn't respond. Growing concerned, she decides to reach out to Chad instead. Chad, however, brushes off her worries, convinced it's just a prank. With 800,000 live viewers on the line, he has no plans to end his stream anytime soon and tells her he'll go check things out himself. Realizing she's missing out on the potential for viral content, Jen insists they should both go back to the house. Spencer, on the other hand, isn't so keen on the idea. Haunted houses aren't exactly on brand for them, and he's more than ready to sit this one out, but Jen's already made up her mind. Grabbing her phone, she tells Spencer to stay behind while she heads to find Chad. As she makes her way back to the house, Jen tries to hype up her viewers for more spooky thrills. But when she glances at the comments, she notices they're all focused on her argument with Spencer. Annoyed and needing a moment to think, she takes a brief break to post some selfies and clear things up with her viewers, asking them to stay tuned for more. Jen resumes her stream just as she steps inside the house, but there's no sign of Steve or Chad. Switching over to Chad's stream, she watches as he quietly approaches the front door from outside. Moments later, Chad comes rushing down the stairs, clearly flustered. He explains that he can't find his phone after setting it down to take a leak and has been searching the house with no luck. Even more troubling, he hasn't seen Steve or the body. When Jen points out that Chad's phone is still streaming from outside, he suggests that it's probably a prank by one of their rival streamers. But Jen isn't so sure, sensing that something far more sinister is going on. Suddenly, they hear loud banging on the front door. Jen rushes to open it, but whoever was there has already vanished. Switching back to Chad's stream, they see that the person holding his phone is leading them deeper into the swamp. With 800,000 viewers watching, the growing view count is more thrilling than alarming, so they decide to chase after the mysterious figure, completely unaware that one of them won't make it back. They sprint into the woods, soon arriving at the boardwalk where Chad's phone had been streaming from just moments earlier. Confused, they realize the stream has suddenly ended, leaving them searching the darkness for any sign of the person. Chad picks up the phone, angrily threatening to take action if they don't get it back. But just as someone in the chat mentions, his stream has gone live again. When they switch over, the video now shows someone standing in the middle of the water, filming them from a short distance. Using his flashlight, Chad figures out the direction and bolts toward the figure, leaving Jen behind on the boardwalk. Seizing the moment, Jen shamelessly plugs one of her sponsors as her viewer count is about to hit 1 million. The chat, however, is buzzing with warnings about gators in the swamp. Inspired, Jen straps her phone to a paddle she finds and lowers it into the water to get some underwater footage. As she pulls it back up, the camera captures a glimpse of a man in a black cloak standing directly beneath the boardwalk. The chat goes wild, frantically trying to warn her, but before she can react, the man reaches up, grabbing her legs and dragging her into the murky water below. That makes 2 victims down, with 4 more to go. After Jen's stream cuts off, Spencer grows concerned and tries to call her, but she doesn't pick up. Switching over to Chad's stream, he sees that Chad finally recovered his phone and decides to call him instead. Chad, still convinced it's all just one big prank by Steve, brushes off Spencer's worry. But Spencer's had enough. Determined to find Jen, he gets out of the car, only to be ambushed by the axe-wielding killer. Spencer is brutally murdered while still on the phone with Chad. That makes 3 victims down and 3 more to go. Now it's just Chad, and he's starting to realize this may not be a prank after all. He tries texting Jen but gets no response. He does the same with Steve, with no luck. Panic begins to set in. Switching back to his stream, Chad starts wildly speculating about who could be behind the attacks. That's when he receives a message from Steve, claiming it was all just a revenge prank and telling Chad to meet him in the TV room. Relieved and laughing it off, Chad heads back to the house, admitting that they had him scared for a moment. Distracted by the fact that his stream just hit 1 million viewers for the first time, he doesn't realize he's walking into a trap. When he enters the bedroom, he sees someone sitting in the dark. Thinking it's part of the prank, Chad decides to flip the script by tossing a bundle of fireworks into the room. The fireworks go off right at the figure's feet, but the person in the chair doesn't flinch. Frustrated by the lack of reaction, Chad storms over to the figure in the chair and pulls off the mask, only to discover another mask underneath. That's when it hits him. This isn't Steve. Panic sets in as the masked man rises, axe in hand, and lunges toward him. Chad barely manages to slam the door and lock it from the outside, but he's not safe yet. Sprinting down the hall toward the exit, he quickly realizes he's been trapped inside the house the entire time. He can hear the killer hacking at the door behind him and frantically barricades himself in a nearby room with anything he can find. His nerves shot, Chad finally decides to call the police, explaining the situation as best he can. But the moment the operator realizes who he is, her tone shifts. Recognizing Chad from his notorious streaming antics, she assumes it's just another prank and warns him not to misuse emergency services before hanging up. Just as the call ends, the door behind him shatters, and the killer is loose again. With no other options, Chad hides inside a broken-down cabinet, doing his best to stay silent as the killer prowls the room. However, the chat has taken a dark turn. His viewers are now rooting for him to die. Just when Chad thinks he's in the clear, his phone rings, his location exposed by a viewer who figured out his number. He silences it as fast as he can, but the damage is done. The killer drags him from his hiding spot into the shadows. Miraculously, Chad manages to wriggle free, sustaining only a minor injury, and sprints through the back door into the night. But the truth is that his night from hell is just getting started. Chad dashes into the woods, running until he finds a spot where he can catch his breath. His arm is bleeding badly from the earlier cut, and he starts begging his viewers to call the police for him. Unfortunately, his reputation as an obnoxious streamer has left him with few allies, and most of the 1.5 million viewers are more interested in watching the chaos unfold than offering help. Finally, one viewer drops a location pin, showing a road nearby. Fueled by desperation, Chad sprints toward the road, racing through the dark until he reaches their Jeep. He locks himself inside, frantically searching for the keys, hoping that Spencer left them there. In his panic, he completely overlooks the eerie red light glowing through the back window. With no luck finding the keys, Chad tries to hotwire the car. Pulling up a YouTube tutorial, he impatiently watches as the host dives into a detailed explanation about hotwiring, only to reveal at the end that it's nearly impossible for cars made after 1999. Frustrated, Chad returns to his chat, scrambling for ideas when, out of nowhere, the killer smashes through the driver's side window with the handle of his axe. Chad narrowly escapes, bolting from the Jeep and disappearing back into the woods, with the killer just a few steps behind. After running for what feels like forever, Chad finally stumbles onto a real road. Exhausted, he tries to hail a ride using a ride-sharing app, but there are no drivers in the area. Someone in the chat claims they're on their way, but by now, Chad doesn't trust a word from anyone. When one viewer asks why he's still streaming, Chad fires back, reminding them that this is the biggest night of his career and asking why they're still watching. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appears down the road. It's the frat bros from the chat who said they were coming to help. Relieved, Chad hops into the car, thinking he's finally safe. But as he tries to explain the horror he's been through, it quickly dawns on him that these guys might actually be even bigger jerks than he is. After convincing them that this isn't a prank, Chad gets them to head for the nearest police station. Before they can make it, another truck cuts them off, blocking the road ahead. Chad urges the frat bros to find another way, but they foolishly decide to confront the driver. With misplaced confidence, the two step out of the car, only to be taken down in seconds by the axe-wielding killer. That makes 5 victims down, and only Chad left. He quickly grabs the keys off one of their bodies and runs to the Jeep. Just as he gets in, the killer slams his truck into the vehicle, but Chad manages to throw the car into reverse, sending the killer's truck crashing into a ditch. Feeling triumphant, Chad starts driving away, boasting to his 4 million followers about how he just saved his own life. But his victory is short-lived. He suddenly remembers his friends who died along the way. Then his phone pings. It's a text from Jen's number, demanding he come back to the house or she'll die. Skeptical, Chad asks for proof she's still alive. Moments later, a video arrives of Jen, chained up somewhere inside the house, confirming that the nightmare isn't over yet. Chad, panicked and unsure, asks the chat for advice. They all suggest the same thing. He needs to head back to the basement. After weighing his options, he decides to step up and try to save Jen. But before he moves, he sends a quick message to the police, and this time they respond, saying they're on their way, though it'll take about 45 minutes. Arriving back at the house, Chad digs through the glove box and finds a headlamp along with a baseball bat left behind by one of the frat bros. He realizes a problem. He can't swing the bat properly and still hold his phone for the stream. With over 5 million viewers now watching live, there's no way he's shutting it off. Thinking fast, Chad sets off the car alarm, using it as a distraction to lure the killer outside. As the killer steps out to investigate, Chad slips back into the house unnoticed. To Chad's surprise, instead of turning off the phone, the killer picks it up and starts recording. The chat goes wild, realizing that he might be about to film himself brutally killing Chad. This is the exact kind of content that they like to see, and the views skyrocket. The killer, now filming, makes his way into the basement where Jen is being held, shutting off his own headlamp so that they won't know he's there. But when the killer gets close, Chad jumps up yelling at him to stay back. Wielding the bat, he demands the keys, threatening to beat the killer if he doesn't let them go. It's a bold move, and for a moment it looks like Chad might have the upper hand. But everything changes when Jen asks what he'll do about the rest of them. Glancing around, he suddenly realizes they're surrounded. Other cult members are emerging from the darkness. Before Chad can react, one of them rushes forward and stabs him in the back. Rather than finishing him off, they turn their attention to Jen, brutally killing her as Chad struggles to get away. In agony, Chad limps back through the house, only to stumble upon the cult feasting on Spencer's corpse. With no allies left, Chad runs up to the attic, his last place of refuge. But it's no use. One of the cult members knocks him down and chains him to the floor, leaving him helpless. Chad, with nothing left, takes a final moment to tell his mom he loves her. The killer places the phone in front of his face, capturing everything as he steps into the frame and swings the axe down into Chad's back. With all 6 victims dead, the stream slowly fades, the views dropping off until there's no one left watching as Chad bleeds out, utterly alone.